Sarah Chen thought the biggest stress in her life was her advanced cryptography final exam scheduled for the next morning. She sat hunched over her laptop in her cramped dorm room at MIT, surrounded by empty energy drink cans and scattered notes filled with mathematical equations that would make most people's heads spin. The digital clock on her desk glowed 11:47 p.m., and the campus had settled into that familiar late-night quiet that only exists during finals week. What she didn't know was that in exactly 13 minutes, her entire world would explode into chaos. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Sarah had always been different from her classmates. While other students struggled with basic programming concepts, she was already developing her own encryption algorithms in her spare time. Her professors noticed her exceptional talent early on, but what they didn't know was that Sarah had been secretly corresponding with various cybersecurity firms since her sophomore year. Her reputation in underground hacker forums was legendary, though she always operated on the right side of the law. Her code name in these circles was Cipher, a name that would soon take on a significance she never imagined. The knock on her door came at exactly midnight. Not the casual rap of a dorm mate looking to borrow notes, but 3 precise, measured knocks, followed by 2 quick ones. Sarah frowned, pausing her typing. She wasn't expecting anyone, and the pattern was oddly specific. She glanced toward the door, her instincts suddenly on high alert. Something felt wrong. Sarah Chen? The voice was crisp, professional, and definitely not from anyone she knew on campus. "Who's asking?" she called back, her hand instinctively moving toward her phone. "Agent Martinez, FBI Cybercrime Division. We need to speak with you immediately." Sarah's heart began racing. FBI? At midnight? During finals week? Her mind raced through every online activity she'd engaged in over the past months. Everything had been legal, everything had been sanctioned, but she knew that in the world of cybersecurity, the lines could sometimes appear blurred to outsiders. She approached the door cautiously, peering through the peephole. 2 figures in dark suits stood in the hallway, their postures rigid and alert. The woman in front held up an official-looking badge. Behind her, a tall man scanned the hallway with the systematic attention of someone trained in security protocols. Sarah opened the door slowly, keeping the chain lock engaged. "Can I see that badge again?" Agent Martinez held it up patiently. "Miss Chen, we're here because we need your expertise. There's been a significant cybersecurity breach that threatens national security, and your particular skill set has been specifically requested." "Requested by whom?" Sarah asked, though she was already reaching for the chain lock. Something about Agent Martinez's demeanor convinced her this was legitimate. "That's classified until you're read in," the male agent spoke for the first time. "I'm Agent Thompson. We need you to come with us immediately." Sarah's mind reeled. "Now? I have a final exam tomorrow morning. Can't this wait?" "Miss Chen," Agent Martinez's voice carried an urgency that made Sarah's stomach drop. "In approximately 47 hours, if we don't stop what's happening, your final exam will be the least of anyone's concerns." The weight of those words settled over her like a heavy blanket. She looked at her laptop, still displaying lines of code she'd been working on for her exam. Her normal, predictable life as a college student felt very far away. "What kind of breach are we talking about?" she asked, her academic curiosity overriding her caution. "The kind that could cripple our entire defense infrastructure," Agent Thompson replied grimly. "Someone has infiltrated systems that are supposed to be impossible to hack. They're using techniques that shouldn't exist, algorithms that are years ahead of what we thought was possible." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. She specialized in exactly those kinds of advanced techniques. In fact, some of her theoretical work had been in developing exactly the type of algorithms Agent Thompson was describing. "Who requested me specifically?" she pressed. Agent Martinez exchanged a glance with her partner. "Someone who knows your work very well. Someone who believes you might be the only person capable of understanding what we're up against." Sarah's laptop chimed with an incoming message. She glanced at the screen and froze. The message was addressed to Cipher. her underground code name that she had never shared with anyone in official channels. The message was simple. Time to play in the big leagues. Your country needs you. Sarah looked up at the agents, her face pale. Give me 5 minutes to pack. As she threw essentials into a backpack, her mind raced with possibilities. How did the FBI know about her code name? Who had recommended her for this mysterious mission? And what kind of cybersecurity threat was so severe that they needed to recruit college students at midnight? She grabbed her laptop and her most advanced portable drives, equipment she had built herself that contained her most sophisticated tools. Whatever was happening, she had a feeling she was going to need every advantage she could get. Ready, she announced, stepping into the hallway and closing her door behind her. Agent Martinez nodded approvingly. Miss Chen, what I am about to tell you cannot leave this conversation. Are we clear? Crystal. In 6 hours, you're going to be briefed by people whose names you'll never know about threats you've never imagined for a mission that officially doesn't exist. Sarah swallowed hard. And if I refuse? Agent Thompson's expression was grim. Then a lot of good people are going to die, and our country is going to face its darkest hour. As they walked toward the elevator, Sarah caught her reflection in the hallway mirror. She looked like exactly what she was, a tired college student in pajamas and a hoodie. She had no idea that in less than 72 hours, she would be leading one of the most critical cybersecurity operations in American history. The black SUV waiting outside her dormitory was the kind of vehicle that screamed government operation. Tinted windows, reinforced body, and an engine that purred with the kind of power that suggested high-speed capabilities. Sarah slid into the back seat between the two agents, still trying to process the surreal turn her evening had taken. "Where are we going?" she asked as they pulled away from the familiar campus streets. "Logan Airport," Agent Martinez replied. "There's a military transport waiting." "Military transport?" Sarah's voice pitched higher. "I thought you said this was FBI." "It is," Agent Thompson said from the front passenger seat. "But the threat we're dealing with crosses multiple agencies. FBI, NSA, military intelligence, everyone's involved." The drive to Logan Airport took 45 minutes through empty Boston streets. Sarah spent the time trying to piece together what she knew. Someone had hacked systems that were supposed to be unhackable. They were using advanced techniques that sounded suspiciously like theoretical work she'd done in her advanced cryptography courses. And somehow, her underground reputation as Cipher had reached the highest levels of government intelligence. The more she thought about it, the more questions arose. Her work in encryption and cybersecurity was brilliant, but she was still a student. Surely there were experienced professionals, people with decades of experience and top-level security clearances, who would be better suited for this kind of operation. Unless the threat was so unique, so unprecedented, that conventional approaches wouldn't work. "Agent Martinez," Sarah began carefully, "you mentioned that someone specifically requested me. Can you give me any hint about who that might be?" The female agent was quiet for a long moment. Finally, she spoke without turning around. "Have you ever heard of Dr. Elena Vasquez?" Sarah's breath caught. Dr. Elena Vasquez was a legend in cybersecurity circles, a former MIT professor who'd been recruited by the NSA 15 years ago and had since become one of the most respected figures in government intelligence. Sarah had actually attended one of her guest lectures 2 years ago, though she doubted the woman would remember her. "She recommended me?" Sarah asked, incredulous. "She insisted on you," Agent Thompson corrected. "Said you were the only person she knew who thought about encryption the way this hacker does." That statement sent a chill through Sarah's entire body. Dr. Vasquez knew her work well enough to recognize her thinking patterns? How was that possible? Sarah had always been careful to keep her academic work and her underground activities separate. The military section of Logan Airport was nothing like the civilian terminals. No crowds, no chaos, just efficient personnel and serious-looking aircraft.
The transport plane they escorted her to was a C-130, its cargo bay fitted with rows of seats and communication equipment that suggested this wasn't just a simple transport flight. "How long is the flight?" Sarah asked as they strapped in. 3 hours. Try to get some sleep. Where we're going, you're going to need to be sharp." But sleep was impossible. Sarah's mind was racing, trying to prepare for whatever lay ahead. She thought about her finals, about her normal college concerns that now seemed incredibly trivial. Her roommate would wake up in the morning to find her gone without explanation. Her professors would wonder why she'd missed her most important exam. None of that seemed to matter now. The plane lifted off into the pre-dawn darkness, carrying Sarah towards a destination she didn't know for a mission she couldn't imagine. She closed her eyes and tried to center herself, drawing on meditation techniques she'd learned to help with test anxiety. Somehow, she doubted those techniques had been designed for situations involving national security threats. 3 hours later, they touched down at what appeared to be a military base in an undisclosed location. The landscape outside the small windows was desert, flat and brown, and utterly unfamiliar. Sarah had never been west of the Mississippi River, and the alien terrain only added to her growing sense of displacement. "Welcome to the most secure facility you've never heard of," Agent Thompson said as they disembarked. "From this point forward, everything you see, hear, and experience is classified at the highest levels." The base was a study in controlled efficiency. Personnel moved with purpose, vehicles transported equipment and people with military precision, and the entire atmosphere hummed with the kind of focused energy that suggested critical operations were constantly in progress. They were met by a man in military fatigues, whose bearing immediately identified him as high-ranking brass. "Miss Chen," he said, extending his hand. "Colonel Harrison, United States Cyber Command. Dr. Vasquez is waiting for you." As they walked across the tarmac, Sarah caught glimpses of aircraft she didn't recognize, vehicles with equipment that looked far more advanced than anything she'd seen in civilian life, and personnel whose uniforms bore insignias from multiple branches of service and intelligence agencies. "Colonel," Sarah ventured, "can you tell me anything about what I'm walking into?" Colonel Harrison's expression was grim. "Miss Chen, in the past 72 hours, someone has successfully penetrated the cybersecurity systems of 3 separate critical infrastructure networks: power grids, communication, and defense databases. They've done it using techniques that our best analysts can't understand, much less counter." "And you think I can?" "Dr. Vasquez thinks you can. That's good enough for me." They entered a building that looked innocuous from the outside, but immediately revealed itself to be a high-tech command center. Banks of monitors displayed scrolling data, analysts sat at workstations that looked like something from a science fiction movie, and the entire facility hummed with electronic activity. "Sarah," she turned to see Dr. Elena Vasquez approaching, and despite the circumstances, Sarah felt a surge of excitement at seeing one of her academic heroes in person. Dr. Vasquez was shorter than Sarah remembered, but her presence filled the room. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she wore casual clothes that suggested she'd been working around the clock. "Dr. Vasquez, I have to admit I'm pretty confused about why I'm here." "Because," Dr. Vasquez said, her expression serious, "the person who's attacking our systems thinks exactly like you do. I've been analyzing their techniques for the past 3 days, and I keep seeing patterns that remind me of your work." Sarah felt a cold pit forming in her stomach. "My work? But I know you've never done anything malicious," Dr. Vasquez interrupted. "But your theoretical approaches to encryption and system penetration are remarkably similar to what we're seeing in these attacks. Either this hacker has studied your work extensively, or—" She paused, and Sarah felt the weight of unspoken possibilities. "Or what?" "There's someone who thinks about cybersecurity the same way you do. Someone with similar training, similar instincts, and similar capabilities." Dr. Vasquez gestured towards a bank of monitors displaying complex data streams. "Sarah, I need you to look at these attack patterns and tell me what you see, because right now, you might be our only hope of understanding what we're up against."
The data streams on the monitors look like digital poetry written in a language only a few people in the world could understand. Sarah approached slowly, her trained eye immediately beginning to pick up patterns in the chaos of scrolling code and system logs. What she saw made her heart race with a mixture of professional admiration and growing dread. "This is impossible," she whispered, her fingers unconsciously reaching toward the screens as if she could touch the data itself. "What do you see?" Dr. Vasquez asked, moving to stand beside her. Sarah was quiet for several minutes, her mind processing the attack signatures with the kind of focused intensity that had made her legendary among her professors. The other personnel in the command center seemed to sense the importance of the moment and worked more quietly, giving her space to concentrate. "These aren't random attacks," Sarah finally said, her voice carrying a note of awe that she couldn't suppress. "This is systematic, methodical, and incredibly sophisticated. Look at this pattern here. They're not just breaking into systems, they're rewriting the fundamental security protocols as they go." She pointed to a section of code on one of the monitors. "See this? This is a variation of an algorithm I developed last year for my advanced encryption course. But it's been modified, improved, made more elegant." Dr. Vasquez exchanged glances with Colonel Harrison. "Modified how?" "I had this theoretical approach to breaking multi-layered encryption, but I could never make it practical. Whoever did this figured out the missing piece." The implications of that statement hung heavy in the air. Someone had not only studied Sarah's work, but had improved upon it to create weapons-grade hacking tools. "There's more," Sarah continued, moving to another monitor. "Look at the timing of these attacks. They're not random either. They're hitting systems in a specific sequence, building toward something." "Building toward what?" Colonel Harrison asked. Sarah studied the data for another few minutes, her mind racing through possibilities. I think they're mapping our entire cybersecurity infrastructure, not to destroy it, but to understand it completely. These attacks aren't the end goal, they're reconnaissance." "For reconnaissance for what?" Dr. Vasquez pressed. "For the real attack," Sarah said grimly. "All of this has been preparation. They're learning exactly how our systems work, how they're connected, where the weak points are. When they're ready to make their real move, they'll be able to shut down everything at once." The silence that followed Sarah's assessment was deafening. She could see the implications of her words reflected in the faces around her. If she was right, then the past 3 days of cyber attacks were just the opening moves in what could be the most devastating assault on American infrastructure in history. "How long do we have?" Colonel Harrison asked quietly. Sarah turned back to the monitors, studying the progression of attacks over time. Based on the pattern and the rate of reconnaissance, maybe 48 hours, possibly less. 48 hours until what? Dr. Vasquez demanded. "Until they shut down everything," Sarah replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "Power grids, communication networks, transportation systems, financial networks, everything connected to the internet becomes a weapon they can use against us." Colonel Harrison was already reaching for his secure communication device. "I need to brief the Joint Chiefs immediately." "Wait," Sarah called out, causing him to pause. "There's something else, something that might be even more important." She had moved to a different bank of monitors, these ones showing geographical data overlaid with network topology maps. "Look at the locations of these attacks. They're not random either." Dr. Vasquez joined her, studying the displayed map. "What am I looking at?" "The attacks are clustered around specific geographical areas that correspond to major military installations, government facilities, and critical infrastructure hubs. But there's a pattern within the pattern." Sarah's fingers flew over the keyboard, pulling up additional data and overlaying it on the map. "Here, here, and here. These attack clusters correspond to facilities involved in a specific type of classified research."
What kind of research? Colonel Harrison had returned, his phone call temporarily forgotten. Sarah hesitated. I shouldn't know about this, but my academic advisor mentioned it once. Research into something called quantum cryptography networks. Basically, unhackable communication systems using quantum mechanics. The color drained from Dr. Vasquez's face. How could you possibly know about that? I told you, my academic advisor mentioned it. Dr. Richardson at MIT. He said it was theoretical research, years away from practical application. Dr. Vasquez and Colonel Harrison exchanged a look that made Sarah's stomach drop. Ms. Chen, Colonel Harrison said slowly, Dr. Richardson has been missing for 6 days. The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. Dr. Richardson, her mentor, the professor who had guided her through her most advanced coursework, was missing. And now someone was using techniques derived from her work to attack systems related to his research. There's something you need to know, Dr. Vasquez said gently. Dr. Richardson wasn't just your academic advisor. He was also a consultant for the Quantum Cryptography Network project. He had access to classified information about the most sensitive cybersecurity research in the country. Sarah's mind reeled as the pieces began falling into place. Her mentor was dead, her theoretical work was being used as a weapon against her own country, and somehow she had become the key to stopping a cyber attack that could cripple American civilization. But there's still something that doesn't add up, she said after a moment of processing. If they have Dr. Richardson's knowledge and they've improved my algorithms, why haven't they attacked yet? They clearly have the capability. Dr. Vasquez nodded approvingly. That's exactly the right question. What do you think the answer is? Sarah stood up and began pacing, a habit she had developed when working through complex problems. They're waiting for something, or someone. The reconnaissance phase isn't just about mapping our systems, it's about timing. She stopped suddenly, her eyes widening with realization. Tomorrow, the G7 summit. All the world leaders are going to be in one place, and they'll be relying on secure communication networks that run through the systems currently under reconnaissance. Dear God, Colonel Harrison breathed. They're not just planning to attack our infrastructure, they're planning to attack during the summit when the entire world will be watching. Sarah nodded grimly. And if they can shut down our communication and defense networks during the summit, they can hold the world's most powerful leaders hostage to their demands. The command center had gone completely quiet. Every person in the room understood that they had just uncovered what might be the most audacious terrorist plot in modern history. Preparing and narrating the story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story.
Dr. Vasquez immediately began coordinating with personnel across the command center while Colonel Harrison worked his secure communications. But Sarah found herself staring at the monitors with growing unease. Something still didn't feel right about the scenario they had constructed. Dr. Vasquez, she called out, interrupting the organized chaos that had erupted around them. I need to show you something else. The older woman approached, her expression tense with the urgency of their situation. What is it, Sarah? Look at this attack signature again, Sarah said, pointing to a specific data stream. I said it was based on my work, but I was wrong. It's not just based on my work. It's using my work exactly as I wrote it. What do you mean? Sarah pulled up another screen, this one displaying code she had written for a theoretical penetration testing algorithm. Side by side with the attack signature, the similarities were unmistakable, not just in approach, but in actual implementation details that should have been impossible for an outside observer to know. Dr. Vasquez, this code includes debugging comments that I never published anywhere, comments that were only in my personal files. The implications of that statement made both women freeze. Dr. Vasquez's face went pale as she processed what Sarah was telling her. Are you saying someone has access to your personal computer? I'm saying someone has access to files that never on any networked system, Sarah replied grimly. These comments were in handwritten notes in my dorm room, notes I never digitized. The command center seemed to fade around them as the full significance of Sarah's discovery became clear. If the attackers had access to Sarah's personal, handwritten notes, then the scope of the operation was far larger than anyone had imagined.
"Colonel Harrison," Dr. Vasquez called out, her voice carrying an urgency that made everyone in the room stop what they were doing. "What is it?" He approached quickly, still holding his secure communication device. "We need to consider the possibility that this entire operation is more personal than we thought," Dr. Vasquez said carefully. "The attackers don't just have Dr. Richardson's research. They have access to Sarah's personal work in ways that suggest direct, physical surveillance." Colonel Harrison's expression darkened. "How direct are we talking?" Sarah swallowed hard before answering. "Someone has been in my dorm room. Someone photographed or copied notes that never left my desk. This isn't just about stolen research. This is about someone who has been watching me personally." The colonel immediately activated his communication device. "Command, we need a full security sweep of MIT campus, specifically focused on dormitories in the computer science wing. Priority Alpha." As he coordinated the security response, Sarah found herself thinking about the past few months with new eyes. Had there been signs? Moments when she felt watched? Times when her things seemed slightly out of place? She tried to recall any unusual incidents, but nothing stood out. Whoever had been surveilling her was a professional. "Sarah," Dr. Vasquez said gently, "I need you to think very carefully. In the past 6 months, has anyone new entered your life? Someone who showed unusual interest in your work?" She considered the question, running through her social interactions over the past semester. Her circle was small, mostly other computer science students and professors. She dated occasionally, but no one seriously. She was friendly with her dorm mates, but not particularly close with anyone. "Wait," she said suddenly, her heart beginning to race. "There was someone, a graduate student named Marcus Webb. He started showing up at the computer lab about 3 months ago, always seemed to be working when I was there." "What made him stand out?" "He asked a lot of questions about my encryption work, said he was working on his thesis in cybersecurity. But now that I think about it, some of his questions were really specific, like he already knew what I was working on and wanted to understand my methodology." Dr. Vasquez was already signaling to one of the analysts. "I need a full background check on Marcus Webb, graduate student at MIT. Cross-reference with known foreign intelligence operatives." The analyst began typing rapidly, pulling up databases and running searches across multiple intelligence systems. Within minutes, preliminary results were appearing on a screen. "Ma'am, I think I have a match, but you're not going to like it." Dr. Vasquez moved to stand behind the analyst, studying his screen. Her face went white as she read the information displayed there. "Who is he?" Colonel Harrison demanded. "According to this, Marcus Webb was an identity used by Dmitry Volkov, a Russian intelligence operative specializing in technology acquisition and deep cover surveillance operations." The name hit Sarah like a physical blow. Dmitry Volkov, the friendly graduate student who had shown genuine interest in her work, who had bought her coffee during late-night lab sessions, who had even helped her debug code when she was struggling with complex algorithms. He was Russian intelligence? "One of their best," the analyst continued reading. "Graduated from Moscow State University with advanced degrees in computer science and psychology. Trained in long-term infiltration operations specifically targeting American technical assets." Sarah sank into a chair, overwhelmed by the implications. For months, she had been unknowingly providing information to a foreign intelligence agent. Every conversation about her work, every explanation of her methodologies, every casual mention of her professors or her research, all of it had been intelligence gathering. "But that still doesn't explain how they got my handwritten notes," she said, grasping for some element of the situation that made sense. Dr. Vasquez's expression was grim. "Sarah, when was the last time you saw Marcus Webb?" Sarah thought back, trying to place the timeline. "Maybe 2 weeks ago? He said he was going to be traveling for research, wouldn't be around the lab for a while." 2 weeks ago, Dr. Vasquez repeated, exchanging glances with Colonel Harrison. "Right around the time Dr. Richardson disappeared." The connections were becoming clearer, and each new revelation made Sarah feel more manipulated and violated. Dmitry, Marcus, had spent months cultivating a relationship with me, learning about my work, gaining my trust, and when he had gathered everything he could from direct observation, he had moved on to more direct methods. "You think he broke into my room?" "I think he did whatever was necessary to get the information he needed," Colonel Harrison replied. "The question now is what we do about it." Before anyone could answer, alarms began blaring throughout the command center. Red lights flashed on every console, and personnel began moving with the kind of urgent efficiency that suggested a major emergency. "What's happening?" Sarah called out over the noise. An analyst at the far end of the room was shouting updates. "Multiple simultaneous intrusion attempts across 17 critical infrastructure networks. This is not a drill. The attacks are active and ongoing." Dr. Vasquez grabbed Sarah's arm. "It's starting. They've moved up their timeline." Sarah looked at the monitors around the room, watching as attack signatures identical to the ones she had been analyzing began appearing in real time across dozens of systems. The reconnaissance phase was over. The real assault on American infrastructure had begun. "But the G7 summit isn't until tomorrow," Sarah protested. Maybe that was misdirection, or maybe they decided to accelerate their timeline because they know we're onto them. The reality of the situation crashed over Sarah like a wave. Dmitry, Marcus, wasn't just some foreign intelligence operative gathering information for his handlers. He was part of a sophisticated operation that was currently attempting to cripple her country's critical infrastructure. And he had used her, manipulated her, turned her own brilliant mind into a weapon against everything she cared about. But as she watched the attacks unfold in real time, Sarah felt something else besides betrayal and fear. She felt anger. Cold, focused, professional anger. Dmitry had made one critical mistake in his months of manipulation. He had taught Sarah to understand exactly how brilliant she really was. "Dr. Vasquez, I know how to stop this."
The command center had transformed into a symphony of organized chaos. Analysts worked frantically at their stations, military personnel coordinated responses across multiple agencies, and secure communication lines buzzed with urgent conversations. In the center of it all, Sarah stood before a bank of monitors that displayed the real-time cyber attack unfolding across the country. "Tell me your plan," Dr. Vasquez said, moving to stand beside her. Sarah's fingers were already flying across multiple keyboards, pulling up system diagnostics and attack patterns with the kind of intuitive understanding that had made her legendary among her professors. Dmitry made a mistake when he used my algorithms exactly as I wrote them. He thought he was being clever by using my own work against our systems, but he didn't understand the fundamental flaw in my approach. "What flaw?" Colonel Harrison asked, joining them. "I designed these algorithms as theoretical exercises. They were never meant to be deployed in actual attack scenarios. There are built-in limitations, backdoors I included for testing purposes, vulnerabilities that wouldn't matter in an academic environment, but become critical weaknesses in real-world application." Dr. Vasquez's eyes widened with understanding. "You built kill switches into your own code." "Not intentionally, but effectively, yes. When I was developing these penetration algorithms, I needed ways to test them safely, to limit their scope, to shut them down if they work too well. Those safety measures are still embedded in the code Dmitry is using." She gestured to one of the monitors showing active attack signatures. "Look here. This is my recursive encryption algorithm, but see this timing delay? That was something I built in to prevent infinite loops during testing. In an academic environment, it's just a minor inefficiency. In an active attack scenario, it creates a window of vulnerability that can be exploited." Colonel Harrison looked skeptical. "You're talking about exploiting vulnerabilities in attack code that's already inside our systems?" "Exactly," Sarah replied, her confidence growing as she began to see the full scope of the solution. "We can't stop the attacks from the outside. They're using legitimate system access that Dmitry helped them acquire. But we can attack the attack code itself, use its own built-in limitations against it." Dr. Vasquez was nodding slowly, her expression a mixture of admiration and concern. "Sarah, what you're proposing is essentially launching counterattacks against hostile code that's already inside our most sensitive systems. The risk of collateral damage could be enormous." "The risk of doing nothing is worse," Sarah replied grimly.
She pointed to another monitor showing the progression of the attacks. Look at the scope. They're not just probing individual systems anymore, they're linking compromised networks together, creating a web of controlled infrastructure. In another few hours, they'll have enough connected systems to shut down entire regions of the country. An analyst from across the room called out an update that confirmed Sarah's assessment. Ma'am, we're seeing coordinated attacks on power grid management systems in 3 separate states. If they achieve full penetration, they could black out the entire eastern seaboard. The weight of that possibility settled over everyone in the room. A coordinated blackout of the eastern seaboard would affect tens of millions of people, cripple economic activity, and create chaos that could take weeks or months to fully resolve. What do you need? Colonel Harrison asked Sarah. Access, she replied immediately. I need administrative privileges on the quantum cryptography network systems, and I need them now. The counterattack algorithms I'm going to deploy require the kind of system-level access that normally takes weeks of security clearance processing. Done, Colonel Harrison said, already reaching for his communication device. Wait, Dr. Vasquez interrupted. Sarah, before you do this, you need to understand what you're really proposing. You're talking about launching cyber weapons against targets inside American infrastructure. If something goes wrong, if your counter-algorithms cause unintended damage, you could be responsible for the very infrastructure collapse we're trying to prevent. Sarah paused in her typing, considering the weight of that responsibility. Dr. Vasquez was right. What she was proposing is essentially conducting cyber warfare inside her own country's critical systems. If she made a mistake, if her understanding of the attack algorithms was flawed, she could cause exactly the kind of catastrophic damage that Dmitry and his handlers were trying to achieve. But as she looked at the monitors showing the steady progression of the attacks, she realized they were running out of alternatives. Conventional cybersecurity responses weren't working because the attackers had inside knowledge of the systems they were targeting. Traditional defenses had been bypassed because the attacks were using legitimate system access combined with theoretical algorithms that no one else fully understood. Dr. Vasquez said quietly, Dmitry, I created the weapons they're using against us. That makes me responsible for stopping them, regardless of the risk. She turned back to her keyboards, her fingers moving with renewed purpose. Besides, I have one advantage that Dmitry doesn't know about. When I was developing these penetration algorithms, I wasn't just building theoretical tools, I was building them to be improved upon. Every algorithm has evolutionary pathways built into its structure, ways to modify and enhance the code. What does that mean practically? Colonel Harrison asked. It means I can write counter-algorithms that aren't just designed to stop the attacks, they're designed to learn from them, to evolve in real time as the attack algorithms adapt. Sarah's voice carried a note of excitement that surprised even her. Dmitry thinks he's using my weapons against me, but what he doesn't understand is that I built those weapons to fight back. Dr. Vasquez was studying the code Sarah was writing, her expression growing more impressed by the minute. This is remarkable. You're essentially creating cybersecurity immune systems. Exactly. Algorithms that don't just defend against specific attacks, but that learn to recognize and counterattack patterns as they evolve. Sarah paused to point to a section of her code. Here, this is a pattern recognition routine that analyzes attack behavior and generates countermeasures dynamically. And here, this is a distributed deployment system that can push those countermeasures to multiple networks simultaneously. An urgent voice from across the room interrupted their technical discussion. Ma'am, we've got escalation. The attackers have broken through preliminary defenses on the financial network systems. They're now targeting banking infrastructure. Sarah's heart rate spiked as she realized the implications. If the attackers gain control of banking systems in addition to power grids and communication networks, they could effectively hold the entire economic economy hostage. How long until my access is approved? She asked Colonel Harrison urgently. 2 minutes, he replied, checking his secure device. But Sarah, once you deploy these counter-algorithms, there's no taking them back. Are you absolutely certain this will work? Sarah looked at the monitors showing the expanding scope of the attacks, then at her own code displaying the elegant counter algorithms she had designed. The mathematics were sound, the logic was flawless, and her understanding of the attack certain, she said firmly, but I need one more thing. What? I need to contact Dmitry directly. The silence that followed her request was deafening. Dr. Vasquez stared at her in shock, while Colonel Harrison's expression suggested he thought he might have lost his mind. Contact him? Dr. Vasquez repeated carefully. Sarah, he's a foreign intelligence operative who has spent months manipulating you. Why would you want to contact him? Because he's monitoring these systems in real time. He'll see my counter algorithms deploy, and he'll try to adapt his attacks to overcome them. But if I can communicate with him directly, I can use his own arrogance against him. She pulled up a communication interface that could connect to the compromised networks. Dmitry thinks he knows me, thinks he understands how I approach problems. He spent months studying my work, learning my methodologies. But what he doesn't understand is that I've been studying him, too. How have you been studying him? Colonel Harrison asked suspiciously. Every conversation we had, every question he asked, every interest he showed in specific aspects of my work, all of that was intelligence gathering on his part, but it was also intelligence gathering on mine, even if I didn't realize it at the time. I know how his mind works now. I know what kinds of solutions he'll try first, what his fallback strategies will be, how he thinks about problem solving under pressure. Dr. Vasquez was beginning to understand. You want to manipulate the manipulator. I want to turn his months of psychological profiling against him. He thinks he has an advantage because he knows how I think, but knowing someone's thought patterns works both ways. The access approval came through exactly when Colonel Harrison had predicted. Sarah's fingers flew across multiple keyboards as she began deploying her counter algorithms across the compromised networks. The code spread through the systems like digital antibodies, seeking out attack signatures and beginning the process of systematic neutralization. Deployment successful, she announced. Counter algorithms are active and adapting. Now for the personal touch. She opened a direct communication channel to the compromised systems and began typing a message she knew Dmitry would see. Hello, Marcus. I figured out your real name. Hope you're enjoying my homework assignments. Cipher. The response came back within seconds. Sarah, I was wondering when you'd realize how thoroughly you'd been compromised. Impressive countercode, but you always were too clever for your own good.
Sarah smiled grimly as she typed her response. Clever enough to build kill switches into everything I create. Did you really think I wouldn't plan for someone stealing my work? Kill switches can be found and disabled. I've had months to study your code. True, Sarah replied, but you've only studied the code I let you see. You never realized that I was watching you watch me. There was a longer pause before Dmitry's next message. Explain. Sarah's fingers moved rapidly as she deployed the next phase of her plan. Every algorithm you stole has a twin, a shadow version that I never wrote down, never saved to any computer, never mentioned to anyone. Code that exists only in my head, designed specifically to counter the versions you took. As she typed, she was simultaneously launching these shadow algorithms, counterattack code she had developed mentally over the months of her interactions with Dmitry, algorithms designed specifically to neutralize the exact attack patterns he would employ. Impossible, came Dmitry's response. No one develops complex algorithms entirely in their head. No one except someone who's been unknowingly training to fight you for months, Sarah replied. Every question you asked me, every technique you wanted me to explain, every methodology you seemed interested in, I was unconsciously developing countermeasures, even when I thought I was just helping a fellow student. The monitors around the command center began showing the results of Sarah's shadow algorithms. Attack signatures were not just being neutralized, they were being systematically dismantled, and their component code repurposed to strengthen the very systems they had been designed to compromise. You're turning my attacks into defenses, Dimitri's message appeared, and for the first time, Sarah detected a note of grudging admiration. I'm turning your attacks into better versions of themselves, Sarah corrected. Algorithms that protect instead of destroy, that strengthen instead of weaken, that build instead of tear down. It's what you never understood about my work, Marcus. I don't create weapons. I create tools that become whatever their users need them to be.
The transformation happening across the compromised networks was unlike anything anyone in the command center had ever seen. Sarah's shadow algorithms weren't just stopping the attacks. They were performing digital alchemy, converting malicious code into protective systems that actively strengthened the very infrastructure they had been designed to destroy. "Status report," Colonel Harrison called out to his analysts. "Sir, the power grid attacks have been completely neutralized," came the first response. But more than that, the systems are now more secure than they were before the attacks began. "Banking networks showing similar results," another analyst reported. "All hostile intrusions have been eliminated, and we're seeing enhanced security protocols being automatically implemented." Dr. Vasquez watched the displays with an expression of amazement. "Sarah, this is extraordinary. Your algorithms aren't just defending, they're learning from the attack patterns and using that knowledge to predict and prevent future vulnerabilities." Sarah continued her digital conversation with Dimitri while monitoring the systematic conversion of his attack infrastructure. "The thing about being a student, Marcus, is that you're always thinking about how to improve your work. Every algorithm I created was designed to evolve, to become better versions of themselves." "You're weaponizing improvement itself," came Dimitri's response. "Impressive. But you can't counter everything. I have assets you know nothing about." Sarah's blood ran cold as she read that message. What assets? Did you really think this was just a cyber operation? Dr. Richardson wasn't just killed for his knowledge, he was killed to eliminate the one person who might have been able to stop us, but not before we learned about Project Deepwatch. Sarah had never heard of Project Deepwatch, but the name sent chills down her spine. She looked at Dr. Vasquez, who had gone pale. "What's Project Deepwatch?" Sarah asked aloud. Dr. Vasquez's voice was barely a whisper. "It's a theoretical defense protocol that would allow manual override of all critical infrastructure systems in the event of a catastrophic cyber attack, a way to shut down everything and restart from scratch if necessary." "A digital nuclear option," Colonel Harrison said grimly. Sarah's heart sank as she understood the implications. They're not just trying to control our infrastructure, they're trying to force us to shut it down ourselves. Her conversation with Dimitri continued. "You see the problem now, don't you, Sarah? Your counter-algorithms work perfectly against the attacks you can see. But what about the attacks that are designed to make you think you're winning?" Sarah stared at the monitors showing her successful neutralization of the cyber attacks. What if Dimitri was right? What if the real purpose of the attacks wasn't to succeed, but to demonstrate that the infrastructure was vulnerable enough to justify activating Project Deepwatch? "That's brilliant," she typed reluctantly. "Force us to shut down our own systems by making us believe we have no choice." Now you're beginning to understand, but it's too late to stop it. Project Deepwatch has already been activated. Alarms began blaring throughout the command center, different alarms than before, these ones carrying an even more urgent tone. Colonel Harrison's secure communication device erupted with incoming calls from the highest levels of government. "Sir, we are receiving shutdown orders for all critical infrastructure networks. Immediate implementation of Protocol Deepwatch authorized by presidential order." Sarah felt like the floor had dropped out from under her. Despite her successful counterattacks, despite neutralizing Dimitri's cyber weapons, the ultimate goal of the operation was being achieved. In minutes, every major system in the country would be manually shut down to prevent further cyber attacks, exactly what Dimitri and his handlers wanted. "Dr. Vasquez," Sarah said urgently. Can Deepwatch be stopped once it's activated? Not through normal channels, Dr. Vasquez replied grimly. It requires simultaneous authorization from multiple government agencies. Even if we wanted to abort, we'd need clearance from people who don't even know this operation exists. Sarah's mind raced through possibilities. The cyber attacks had been a feint, an elaborate deception designed to trigger America's own digital self-destruct mechanism. But Dmitry made one crucial error. He had underestimated exactly how thoroughly Sarah understood the systems he was manipulating. I need full administrative access to the Deepwatch protocol, she announced. That's impossible, Colonel Harrison replied. Deepwatch has hardened authorization requirements that can't be bypassed. They can be if you know how the authorization system works, Sarah said, her fingers already moving across her keyboards. Dmitry thinks he's manipulating us into shutting down our own systems, but what he doesn't realize is that Deepwatch isn't just a shutdown protocol, it's also a rebuilding protocol. She was working faster than she had ever worked in her life, diving into system architectures that were classified at levels she wasn't supposed to know existed. But months of theoretical work and her intimate understanding of Dr. Richardson's research were giving her insights into the Deepwatch system that its creators might not have fully realized. If I can access the rebuilding subroutines, she muttered while typing, I can modify them to restore systems selectively, instead of shutting down everything simultaneously. Sarah, Dr. Vasquez said carefully, what you're describing would require you to rewrite fundamental protocols in a system you've never seen before, in real time, while it's actively deploying. Then it's a good thing I've been training for exactly this scenario without knowing it, Sarah replied. Every conversation with Dmitry, every question he asked about my methodologies, every algorithm he wanted me to explain, he was training me to understand the systems he planned to attack. She opened another communication channel to Dmitry. You made one mistake, Marcus. You taught me to think like you. How is that a mistake? Because now I can predict your next move. You're not just planning to shut down our infrastructure, you're planning to offer to help us rebuild it, in exchange for favorable trade agreements, technology transfers, and political concessions. There was a long pause before Dmitry responded. Well played, Sarah, but you're wrong about one thing. What's that? I'm not going to reveal our location. I'm going to come to you. Before Sarah could process what that meant, new alarms began sounding throughout the facility. These weren't cybersecurity alerts. These were physical security warnings indicating unauthorized aircraft approaching the base. Incoming hostiles, an analyst shouted. Multiple aircraft, low altitude, fast approach. Colonel Harrison was immediately on his communications, coordinating defensive responses. But Sarah realized with growing dread that Dmitry's operation had always been more than just a cyber attack. The digital assault had been designed to identify and locate exactly where the American response would be coordinated from. He's been tracking our location through the network traffic, she said to Dr. Vasquez. Every counter algorithm I deployed, every communication I sent, he's been tracing it back to find this facility. Which means he's coming here to finish what he started, Dr. Vasquez replied grimly. Through the reinforced windows of the command center, Sarah could see aircraft approaching in the distance. But these weren't the kind of aircraft she expected from a foreign military operation. They looked like American helicopters. Those are Navy SEALs, Colonel Harrison announced, checking his tactical displays, but they're not scheduled for any operations in this area. Sarah felt her heart stop as she realized the final piece of Dmitry's plan. They're not here for us, she said quietly. As if summoned by her words, the lead helicopter began descending toward the landing pad outside the command center. Through its open doors, Sarah could see figures in full tactical gear preparing to fast rope down. But something was wrong with the picture. As the figures prepared to deploy, she caught a glimpse of one of them removing his helmet, revealing a face she recognized. It was Dmitry, and he was wearing a Navy SEAL uniform.
The sight of Dmitry in Navy SEAL tactical gear sent a shock of pure terror through Sarah's system. The implications were staggering. Not only had he infiltrated American intelligence systems and stolen classified research, but he had somehow gained access to American military operations and equipment. "Those aren't real SEALs," Colonel Harrison said grimly, reaching for his sidearm. "Security Protocol Alpha 7. Full lockdown. All personnel to defensive positions." The command center erupted into controlled chaos as military personnel moved to predetermined defensive positions, while civilians like Sarah and Dr. Vasquez were escorted toward the facility's secure inner chambers. But Sarah pulled away from her escort, her mind racing with possibilities that everyone else was missing. "Wait," she called out to Colonel Harrison. "Something doesn't add up. If Dmitry wanted to attack this facility, why announce his approach? Why use helicopters that would be easily identified as non-authorized?" Dr. Vasquez paused in her movement toward the secure area. "What are you thinking, Sarah?" "I'm thinking this is another layer of the psychological operation," Sarah replied, her eyes fixed on the monitors that were still displaying the aftermath of her successful counterattacks. "Dmitry has been playing a game within a game from the beginning. The cyber attacks were real, but they were also cover for something else." Through the reinforced windows, they could see the helicopters landing and figures in tactical gear spreading out in professional formations around the facility. But instead of attacking, they seemed to be establishing a perimeter, as if they were protecting the base rather than assaulting it. "Colonel Harrison," Sarah said urgently, "I need you to verify the authorization codes for those helicopters. Not just the aircraft identification, but the specific mission authorization codes." Colonel Harrison looked skeptical but activated his secure communication device to run the verification. After several tense minutes, his expression changed from suspicion to confusion. "That's impossible," he muttered, checking his device again. "What's impossible?" Dr. Vasquez demanded. "According to the system, those helicopters are authorized for a classified rescue operation designated Operation Cipher. Mission Priority Alpha 1, authorized by Naval Special Warfare Command." Sarah felt like she had been hit by lightning. "Operation Cipher? They named it after my code name." "More than that," Colonel Harrison continued, his voice filled with disbelief. "According to these records, the operation was authorized 3 days ago, before we even knew about the cyber attacks." The pieces of an impossibly complex puzzle began falling into place in Sarah's mind. Dmitry's infiltration of MIT, his months of psychological profiling, the cyber attacks that seemed designed to showcase rather than hide her abilities, and now a military operation named after her underground identity. "Dr. Vasquez," Sarah said slowly, "what if Dmitry never intended to attack American infrastructure? What if everything we've seen has been an elaborate recruitment operation?" Before Dr. Vasquez could respond, Sarah's communication interface chimed with an incoming message. The sender was listed as D. Volkov. Dmitry wasn't even bothering to hide his identity anymore. "Sarah, you need to see what's really happening. Look outside. Those are real Navy SEALs, and they're here to extract you for a mission that's been in planning for months." Sarah stared at the message, her mind struggling to process the implications. "Extract me for what mission?" "The mission you've been training for without knowing it. Every algorithm you developed, every theoretical approach you created, every conversation we had, all of it was preparation for something much larger than stopping cyber attacks on American infrastructure." Dr. Vasquez was reading over Sarah's shoulder, her face growing pale as she processed the meaning of Dmitry's words. "Sarah, I think we need to consider the possibility that this entire operation has been orchestrated by American intelligence, not foreign adversaries." "That's impossible," Colonel Harrison protested. "I would have been briefed on any operation involving this facility." "Not if the operation was compartmentalized at levels above your clearance, not if it was designed to test not just Sarah's abilities, but the entire cybersecurity response infrastructure." Sarah's communication interface chimed again.
Sarah, the cyber attacks were real, but they weren't designed to succeed. They were designed to identify the most talented cybersecurity mind in the country and put her through the most intensive training program ever devised. You've just completed the final examination. The command center had grown quiet around them as personnel realized that the expected attack wasn't materializing. Instead, the tactical teams outside seemed to be waiting for something. Training program, Sarah typed back to Dmitri. Think about it. A foreign intelligence operative infiltrates MIT and spends months building a relationship with the most promising cybersecurity student in the country. He learns her methodologies, understands her capabilities, and identifies her unique talent for developing algorithms that can evolve and adapt. Then, when the country faces its most sophisticated cyber threat ever, she's the only person capable of stopping it. Sarah felt like the ground was shifting beneath her feet. You're saying the entire infiltration was staged? I'm saying that Dr. Richardson isn't dead. He's been coordinating this operation from the beginning. The quote-unquote classified research I supposedly stole was information he was authorized to share with me. The missing professor scenario was designed to create the urgency necessary to bring out your best work under pressure. Before Sarah could respond, another voice spoke from behind her, a familiar voice that made her heart stop. "Hello, Sarah. I think it's time we talked." She turned around to see Dr. Richardson walking into the command center, very much alive and accompanied by a man in Navy SEAL tactical gear who had removed his helmet to reveal Dimitri's face. "Dr. Richardson?" Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. "But they said you were dead." "I was never dead, Sarah. I was recruiting you." Dr. Richardson approached with the kind of gentle demeanor she remembered from their academic conversations, but his presence in this context felt surreal and disorienting. "Recruiting me for what?" "For the most important cybersecurity operation in American history," he replied. "Sarah, everything you have experienced over the past few days has been a carefully designed assessment. The cyber attacks were real, the threats to infrastructure were genuine, but they were conducted under controlled conditions to evaluate your capabilities under extreme pressure." Dmitri, or whoever he really was, stepped forward. "My name is actually Captain David Mitchell, Navy SEAL Team 6. I've been working undercover for the past 8 months, not as a foreign intelligence operative, but as part of a joint operation between Naval Special Warfare and the NSA. Sarah looked around the command center, at Dr. Vasquez's knowing expression, at Colonel Harrison's gradually clearing confusion, at the monitors still displaying her successful neutralization of the cyber attacks. "So this was all fake?" she asked, feeling a mixture of relief and betrayal. "The threats were real," Dr. Richardson corrected. "The cyber attacks genuinely could have crippled American infrastructure if you hadn't stopped them, but they were conducted by our own cybersecurity teams as part of the most comprehensive national security assessment ever undertaken. And the assessment was designed to identify someone with your unique combination of technical brilliance and operational instincts, someone who could think like both a defender and an attacker, who could develop countermeasures in real time, who could operate effectively under pressure." Sarah sank into a chair, overwhelmed by the revelation that her entire ordeal had been an elaborate test. "Why all the deception? Why not just recruit me directly?" "Because we needed to see how you would perform when you believed the stakes were real. We needed to know that your abilities weren't just theoretical, that you could apply them in crisis situations with national security implications. And now that you've proven yourself," Colonel Harrison added, "we need you for the real mission." Sarah looked up at the assembled group of people who had been manipulating her reality for months. What real mission? Dr. Richardson's expression grew serious. Sarah, the cyber attacks you just defeated were based on real threats that we've identified from multiple foreign adversaries. The algorithms you developed to counter them represent the most advanced cybersecurity tools ever created. We need you to lead a new cybersecurity task force that will protect American interests in an increasingly dangerous digital world. A task force? Sarah repeated. Codename Project Cipher, Captain Mitchell said with a slight smile, named after the most brilliant cybersecurity mind we've ever encountered. Sarah looked around the room at the faces watching her expectantly. These people had put her through an elaborate deception, had manipulated her emotions, and challenged her abilities in ways that still felt invasive and wrong. But they had also recognized her potential and given her the opportunity to prove herself capable of protecting her country. "What if I refuse?" she asked quietly. "Then you go back to MIT, finish your degree, and pretend this never happened."
But Sarah, you've seen what you're capable of. You've experienced what it feels like to use your abilities to protect millions of people. Can you really go back to theoretical algorithms and academic exercises? Sarah closed her eyes and thought about the past few days. Despite the deception, despite the manipulation, she had never felt more alive than when she was developing counter-algorithms in real time, matching her wits against sophisticated attackers, using her mind to protect her country's critical infrastructure. "If I agree," she said finally, "I have conditions." "Name 'em," Colonel Harrison replied immediately. "No more lies. No more elaborate deceptions. If you want me to work with you, it has to be as an equal partner, not as a test subject." "Agreed." "And I want to understand exactly what Project Cipher entails before I commit to anything." Dr. Richardson nodded. Project Cipher is a joint task force between the NSA, Naval Special Warfare, and Cyber Command. Your role would be to lead the development of next-generation cybersecurity protocols and to coordinate responses to advanced persistent threats against American infrastructure. In other words, Captain Mitchell added, you'd be doing exactly what you just did, but on a permanent basis and with unlimited resources. Sarah opened her eyes and looked around the room one more time. These people had put her through hell, but they had also shown her a future where her abilities could make a real difference in the world. "When do we start?" she asked. The briefing room they led Sarah to was unlike anything she had ever seen. The walls were lined with monitors displaying real-time threat assessments from around the globe, communication networks that connected to intelligence agencies across multiple continents, and secure terminals that gave access to classified systems she couldn't even begin to identify. "Welcome to the real Project Cipher," Dr. Richardson said as they settled around a conference table that looked like it belonged in a science fiction movie. Captain Mitchell had changed out of his tactical gear into civilian clothes, but he still carried himself with the alertness of someone trained for combat operations. "Sarah, what I'm about to show you represents the culmination of 2 years of planning and preparation." The central monitor activated, displaying a world map marked with dozens of red indicators. Each of these markers represents a confirmed advanced persistent threat against American cybersecurity infrastructure. Some are state-sponsored, some are criminal organizations, and some are unknown actors using techniques we've never seen before. Sarah studied the display, her analytical mind immediately beginning to process the patterns she observed. The distribution isn't random. These threats are clustered around specific types of targets. "Exactly," Dr. Vasquez said, taking a seat across from Sarah. "They're targeting critical infrastructure, defense networks, and research facilities involved in advanced technology development." "But here's what makes this different from conventional cyber threats," Dr. Richardson added, activating another display. "These attacks are coordinated, not just by individual organizations, but across multiple threat actors who shouldn't have any reason to cooperate with each other." The implications of that statement made Sarah's stomach drop. You're describing a coalition of adversaries working together against American cybersecurity. "That's exactly what we're describing," Colonel Harrison confirmed, "and conventional cybersecurity approaches aren't adequate to address coordinated threats of this magnitude." Captain Mitchell leaned forward. "Sarah, what I'm about to show you represents the culmination of 2 years of planning and preparation. Your shadow algorithms didn't just counter the specific attacks we simulated. They created defensive frameworks that could adapt to variations and improvements in the attack patterns. Sarah was beginning to understand the scope of what they were proposing. You want me to develop cybersecurity systems that can learn and evolve to counter threats that don't exist yet. We want you to revolutionize how America thinks about cybersecurity. Traditional approaches are reactive. We identify threats and develop specific countermeasures. But in a world where threat actors are coordinating their efforts and sharing methodologies, reactive approaches will always be one step behind. What you demonstrated with your shadow algorithms was the ability to think proactively, to develop countermeasures that could adapt to unknown variations of known threats. Sarah stood up and walked to the wall of monitors, studying the global threat assessment in detail. The scale of what they were describing was staggering. Not just individual cyber attacks, but a coordinated campaign by multiple adversaries to systematically compromise American technological infrastructure. How long has this coordinated threat been active? She asked. We first identified coordination patterns about 18 months ago, but the sophistication and scope have been escalating rapidly. What used to be individual attacks by separate groups have evolved into synchronized campaigns that suggest a level of cooperation we've never seen before. And you think one person can develop countermeasures for all of this? Sarah gestured toward the display of global threats. We think one person with your unique combination of abilities can lead a team that develops those countermeasures, Dr. Richardson corrected. Sarah, Project Cipher isn't just about you working alone. It's about you leading a task force of the best cybersecurity minds in the country. Captain Mitchell activated another display showing organizational charts and personnel files. We've identified 12 individuals with complementary skills to yours, specialists in different aspects of cybersecurity, each one brilliant in their own right, but none of them capable of the kind of adaptive thinking you've demonstrated. Sarah scanned the personnel files, recognizing several names from academic publications and industry conferences. These are some of the most respected people in cybersecurity. And they'll all be reporting to you, Dr. Vasquez said with a slight smile, the youngest task force leader in the history of American intelligence. The weight of that responsibility settled over Sarah like a heavy blanket. Leading a team of world-class cybersecurity experts in developing countermeasures against coordinated global threats was beyond anything she had ever imagined for herself. What kind of resources would be available? She asked pragmatically. Unlimited, Colonel Harrison replied immediately. Budget, computing power, access to classified systems, coordination with international allies, whatever you need to protect American cybersecurity interests. And what kind of timeline are we looking at? The coordinated threats are escalating, Dr. Richardson said grimly. Our intelligence suggests that the coalition of adversaries is planning something significant within the next 6 months, something that would make the simulated attacks you just countered look like practice exercises. Sarah felt a familiar surge of excitement mixed with apprehension. It was the same feeling she had experienced when working on her most challenging academic projects, but amplified to a scale that involved national security rather than just academic achievement. If I agree to lead Project Cipher, she said carefully, what happens to my education? I'm still technically a college student. MIT has agreed to provide you with academic credit for your work with Project Cipher. You'll complete your degree while leading the task force, with your cybersecurity work serving as your senior thesis project. More than that, Captain Mitchell added, successful completion of your first year with Project Cipher will automatically qualify you for accelerated admission to any graduate program in the country with full government sponsorship. Sarah walked back to the conference table, her mind working through the practical implications of what they were proposing. Leading a cybersecurity task force would mean giving up the normal college experience she had been planning, but it would also mean using her abilities to protect her country in ways that truly mattered. I have more conditions, she said finally. Go ahead, Colonel Harrison replied. I want regular communication with my family. They can't know the details of what I'm doing, but they need to know I'm safe and that I chose this. Agreed. I want the authority to recruit additional team members if I identify people whose skills would benefit the project. Within reason, agreed. And I want transparency about the threats we're facing. No more simulations presented as real emergencies, no more tests disguised as genuine crises. If I'm going to lead this team, I need to know what's real and what isn't. Dr. Richardson exchanged glances with the others before nodding. Agreed. Sarah, everything we show you from this point forward will be genuine intelligence about real threats.
Sarah took a deep breath, considering the magnitude of the decision she was about to make. 6 months ago, her biggest concern was passing her Advanced Cryptography course. Now she was being asked to lead a classified task force in protecting American cybersecurity against coordinated global threats. "Show me the real intelligence," she said finally. "I want to understand exactly what we're up against." Dr. Richardson activated the secure terminals, and suddenly the monitors around the room filled with classified data streams that made her blood run cold. What she saw was far worse than the simulated attacks she had just countered.
The real threats weren't just sophisticated, they were actively evolving in real time, using artificial intelligence systems to develop new attack vectors faster than human analysts could identify countermeasures. The coordination between different threat actors wasn't just operational cooperation, it was technological integration on a scale that suggested years of preparation. "This is what we're really facing," Dr. Richardson said quietly. "Adversaries who have been building toward a coordinated assault on American technological infrastructure for at least 3 years. Sarah studied the data streams, her mind racing to process the implications of what she was seeing. These attack patterns, they're using machine learning algorithms to optimize their approaches in real time. And they're sharing that optimization across the entire coalition. When one group develops an effective technique, it propagates to all the other threat actors within hours. Which means traditional cybersecurity approaches are completely inadequate," Dr. Vasquez concluded. "By the time we identify a threat and develop countermeasures, they've already evolved beyond our defenses." Sarah felt the familiar thrill of encountering a problem that would require every bit of her intellectual capability to solve. But underneath that excitement was a growing understanding of just how critical the situation really was. "How much time do we have?" she asked. "Based on the escalation patterns we're observing," Colonel Harrison replied, "we estimate 6 months before they're ready to launch coordinated attacks that could cripple multiple critical infrastructure systems simultaneously." 6 months to build a cybersecurity framework that can counter AI-optimized attacks from multiple coordinated adversaries? Sarah mused. "It's ambitious." "It's impossible," Dr. Richardson corrected. "Unless we can develop countermeasures that are just as adaptive and coordinated as the threats we're facing." Sarah nodded slowly, understanding beginning to dawn. "You want me to build an AI system that can develop cybersecurity responses in real time. We want you to build something better than an AI system," Captain Mitchell said. "We want you to build a hybrid intelligence framework that combines artificial intelligence with human intuition and creativity. A system where AI handles the computational analysis and optimization, while human intelligence provides the creative problem-solving and strategic thinking," Dr. Vasquez elaborated. Sarah walked back to the monitors, studying the real-time threat data with new understanding. What they were proposing wasn't just revolutionary, it was necessary. Traditional cybersecurity, even her own advanced algorithms, would always be reactive in nature. But a hybrid intelligence system could potentially be proactive, developing countermeasures for threats that didn't exist yet. "I'll need complete access to the most advanced computing resources available," she said, her mind already beginning to formulate approaches to the challenge. "The NSA's quantum computing facility is at your disposal," replied Colonel Harrison. "And I'll need to recruit specialists in artificial intelligence and machine learning, not just cybersecurity." "Whatever you need," Dr. Richardson confirmed. "And I'll need the authority to collaborate with international allies. If we're facing a global coalition of adversaries, we need a global coalition of defenders. That can be arranged through appropriate diplomatic channels," Captain Mitchell said. Sarah turned back to face the group, her decision crystallizing. What they were asking her to do was unprecedented, but it was also exactly the kind of challenge that had driven her passion for cybersecurity from the beginning. "I accept," she said simply. "When do we start?" "We start now," Dr. Richardson replied, activating additional secure terminals around the room. "Your team is already being assembled. Some of them don't even know they're being recruited yet. And your first priority," Colonel Harrison added, "is developing countermeasures for an immediate threat we've identified." A new display activated, showing attack signatures that were unmistakably targeting American financial systems.
This coalition of adversaries isn't waiting 6 months to test their capabilities. They're planning a coordinated assault on the Federal Reserve and major banking networks within the next 72 hours. Sarah felt her heart rate spike as she realized that her first real mission as leader of Project Cipher would begin immediately. 72 hours to counter a coordinated attack on the entire American financial system? 72 hours to prove that hybrid intelligent cybersecurity can work in practice, not just in theory. Captain Mitchell stood up, his expression shifting back to the operational focus she remembered from their confrontation in the command center. Sarah, I know this is overwhelming, but you've already demonstrated that you can develop effective countermeasures under extreme pressure. Now we need you to do it again, but with real stakes and a real timeline. Sarah looked around the room one more time, at the classified displays showing global threats, at the personnel files of the team she would be leading, at the faces of people who were placing unprecedented trust in her abilities. All right, she said, settling into the chair at the head of the conference table. Let's save the American financial system. Again.
The Project Cipher task force, assembled in a secure facility beneath the Pentagon, was unlike any team Sarah had ever imagined working with. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, the MIT artificial intelligence specialist she had recruited personally, sat across from Captain Alex Rodriguez, a former Navy SEAL who had transitioned into cybersecurity after an injury ended his field career. Next to them, Dr. Kevin Chen, no relation despite the shared surname, represented the National Security Agency's most advanced cryptography division. Status report, Sarah said, settling into her role as task force leader with the kind of natural authority that had surprised even her. The preliminary attack signatures suggest coordination between at least 4 separate threat actors, Dr. Walsh reported, her fingers flying across multiple keyboards as she analyzed incoming data. Russian state actors, Chinese military intelligence, North Korean cyber units, and what appears to be a previously unknown player using techniques we've never encountered. Captain Rodriguez looked up from his tactical analysis station. The unknown player is what concerns me most. Their attack patterns don't match any known doctrine, and their technological capabilities exceed what we've seen from established threat actors. Any theories about their identity? Sarah asked. Based on the sophistication of their operations, Dr. Chen replied, we're looking at either a previously unknown state actor with advanced capabilities or a private organization with access to resources that rival nation-states. Sarah studied the data streams on the central displays, her mind working through the implications of facing an unknown adversary in addition to the established threats they had prepared for. Show me the attack timeline. Dr. Walsh pulled up a chronological analysis that made Sarah's stomach drop. Initial penetration attempts began 6 hours ago. They're moving faster than our intelligence suggested they would. How much faster? Sarah asked, though she already suspected the answer would be bad news. Instead of 72 hours, we're looking at approximately 36 hours before they achieve sufficient system penetration to launch coordinated attacks on Federal Reserve networks, Captain Rodriguez replied grimly. 36 hours, Sarah repeated, feeling the familiar surge of adrenaline that came with impossible deadlines. That changes our entire approach. She stood up and walked to the primary analysis station, her mind shifting into the kind of focused problem-solving mode that had made her legendary among her professors. Dr. Walsh, I need you to start developing AI algorithms that can predict attack evolution in real time, not just respond to current threats, but anticipate how they'll adapt to our countermeasures. Predictive modeling at that level of complexity will require enormous computational resources, Dr. Walsh replied. Use whatever you need. Dr. Chen, I need you to focus on the cryptographic vulnerabilities they're exploiting. If we can't prevent their access, maybe we can limit what they can do once they're inside the systems. And, Captain Rodriguez, Sarah continued, I need you to coordinate with federal agencies to implement manual safeguards for critical financial networks. If our electronic countermeasures fail, we need human operators ready to isolate compromised systems. The team dispersed to their respective stations, and Sarah found herself alone with the central displays showing the real-time progression of the coordinated attacks.
What she saw was both terrifying and fascinating. 4 separate threat actors moving in perfect synchronization, their individual capabilities enhanced by shared intelligence and coordinated timing. But as she studied the attack patterns more closely, Sarah began to notice something that had been hidden in the complexity of the overall operation. The unknown threat actor wasn't just coordinating with the other 3 groups, they were leading them. Dr. Walsh? Pull up the communication patterns between the threat actors. Communication patterns? Dr. Walsh replied, looking up from her AI development work. The timing of their attacks suggests coordination, but I want to see the actual command and control structure. Who's giving orders to whom? Dr. Walsh's analysis appeared on the central display within minutes, and what it revealed made Sarah's blood run cold. That command structure, Sarah said slowly, it's based on American military doctrine. Captain Rodriguez approached the display, his expression growing increasingly concerned as he studied the patterns Sarah had identified. You're right. Those are modified versions of our own operational protocols, which means the unknown threat actor either has access to classified American military communications or they have personnel with intimate knowledge of our operational procedures. Sarah felt pieces of a larger puzzle beginning to fall into place in her mind. What if the unknown threat actor isn't foreign at all? What if we're looking at a domestic threat that's coordinating with foreign adversaries? The implications of that possibility made everyone in the room stop what they were doing. A coordinated attack involving both foreign threat actors and domestic adversaries would represent a fundamentally different kind of national security crisis. Dr. Walsh, I need you to analyze the unknown threat actors' technical signatures and compare them to databases of American cybersecurity professionals. You think we're looking at insider threats? Captain Rodriguez asked. I think we're looking at someone with the same kind of training and capabilities that we have, someone who understands American cybersecurity infrastructure from the inside. Dr. Walsh's analysis took nearly an hour, but when the results appeared on the central display, they confirmed Sarah's worst fears. The unknown threat actor was using techniques that had been developed by American cybersecurity researchers, modified and improved, but fundamentally based on work that had been done within American institutions. The base algorithms are variants of research conducted at MIT, Stanford, and Carnegie Mellon. Someone with access to cutting-edge American cybersecurity research has been sharing that knowledge with foreign threat actors. More than sharing, Dr. Chen corrected, studying the technical details. They've been improving on the American research and using those improvements to enhance the capabilities of our adversaries. Sarah stared at the analysis, her mind racing through the implications that someone with access to the most advanced American cybersecurity research had been working with foreign adversaries to turn that research into weapons against American infrastructure. Captain Rodriguez, she said grimly, we need to consider the possibility that we're not just facing an external attack, we're facing a coordinated operation that includes American cybersecurity professionals working as enemy assets. Internal investigation of potential insider threats is outside our mission parameters. We'd need to coordinate with FBI counterintelligence. We don't have time for coordination, Sarah said, checking the countdown displays that showed less than 30 hours remaining. If there are insider threats involved in this operation, they'll know about our countermeasures in real time. Every defensive strategy we develop could be compromised before we deploy it. The realization that they might be developing countermeasures under direct observation by enemy assets made the entire room fall silent. How could they protect American financial systems from attack if the attackers knew exactly what defenses they were building? We need a different approach, Sarah announced, her mind shifting into the kind of creative problem-solving mode that had made her successful in academic competitions. Instead of trying to develop perfect defenses, we need to develop defenses that work even when the attackers know exactly what we're doing. How is that possible? Dr. Walsh asked. By building countermeasures that become more effective the more information the attackers have about them, Sarah replied, her excitement growing as the solution began to crystallize in her mind.
She walked to the primary workstation and began typing rapidly, developing code frameworks that looked unlike anything her team had seen before. Instead of trying to hide our defensive strategies, we're going to make them completely transparent and then use that transparency as a weapon. Explain, Captain Rodriguez said, his tactical mind intrigued by the unconventional approach. If insider threats are providing real-time intelligence to the attackers, then we give them intelligence that's designed to mislead rather than inform. We develop defensive algorithms that appear to have specific vulnerabilities, but those vulnerabilities are actually traps. Dr. Chen was beginning to understand. You want to create countermeasures that deliberately reveal false information about their own weaknesses. Exactly. The attackers will modify their strategies to exploit vulnerabilities that don't actually exist, while the real defensive capabilities remain hidden in algorithms that appear to be completely different programs. Sarah's approach was so unconventional that it took her team several minutes to fully process the implications. Instead of trying to keep their defenses secret, she was proposing to use the enemy's intelligence capabilities against them. It's brilliant, Dr. Walsh said finally, but it requires us to essentially create two complete sets of countermeasures, the fake ones that will be observed and reported, and the real ones that will actually protect the financial systems. And we have to do it in less than 30 hours, Captain Rodriguez said grimly. Sarah nodded, her fingers already working on code that would form the foundation of the most complex deception operation in cybersecurity history. Then we better get started.
The next 24 hours transformed the Project Cipher team into something resembling a cybersecurity special forces unit. Sarah had divided her team into two parallel tracks, one developing obvious defensive algorithms that would be easily observable by insider threats, and another creating hidden countermeasures that would be embedded within seemingly unrelated systems. Status on the decoy defenses, Sarah called out, her voice hoarse from coordinating multiple complex operations simultaneously. Decoy algorithms are deployed and actively broadcasting their defensive strategies, Dr. Walsh reported. Any insider threats monitoring our activities will see comprehensive firewalls protecting Federal Reserve communication networks with apparent vulnerabilities in the authentication protocols. And the real defenses, Sarah asked. Hidden within the Federal Reserve's routine maintenance systems, Captain Rodriguez replied, the attackers will be targeting the obvious defensive networks while the actual protection algorithms operate through completely different infrastructure. Dr. Chen looked up from his cryptography station. Sarah, we're seeing response from the threat actors. They're modifying their attack strategies exactly as you predicted, focusing on the apparent vulnerabilities in the decoy systems. Sarah allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. Her unconventional approach was working, but she knew the real test would come when the coordinated attacks actually launched. Dr. Walsh, how are the predictive AI algorithms performing? Better than expected. The artificial intelligence systems are successfully anticipating attack evolution and pre-deploying countermeasures. But Sarah, there's something you need to see. Dr. Walsh's tone carried a note of concern that made Sarah immediately move to her station. The displays showed AI analysis of the attack patterns, but what Dr. Walsh was highlighting made Sarah's heart skip a beat. The unknown threat actor isn't just coordinating with foreign adversaries, Dr. Walsh said. They're using our own predictive algorithms against us. Sarah stared at the analysis, recognizing code structures that looked suspiciously familiar. That's impossible. Our predictive algorithms are classified at the highest levels. Not just classified, Dr. Chen added, joining them at the analysis station. Those algorithms were developed specifically for Project Cipher. They shouldn't exist outside this facility. The implications of that discovery made Sarah feel like the ground was shifting beneath her feet. Someone with access to Project Cipher's most classified algorithms was actively working with enemy forces to attack American infrastructure. Captain Rodriguez, Sarah called out, her voice carrying new urgency. I need immediate security protocols. We have a confirmed insider threat within Project Cipher.
Captain Rodriguez was immediately on his communication devices, coordinating with security personnel to lock down the facility and investigate potential breaches. But Sarah realized that conventional security measures might not be adequate for the kind of sophisticated insider threat they were facing. Dr. Walsh, I need you to analyze the compromised algorithms and determine exactly what information has been leaked to the threat actors. Sarah, Dr. Walsh replied carefully, if someone with access to our classified algorithms is working with enemy forces, they'll know about the decoy defenses too. They'll know that our real countermeasures are hidden in the maintenance systems. Sarah felt a cold pit forming in her stomach as she realized the full implications of Dr. Walsh's observation. If the insider threat knew about both the decoy and real defensive systems, then their entire strategy was compromised. How long until the coordinated attacks begin? 12 hours, Dr. Chen replied grimly. 12 hours to completely rebuild our defensive strategy, Sarah muttered, her mind racing through possibilities. Dr. Walsh, can the AI systems develop entirely new countermeasures in that time frame? Not from scratch. But if we can modify the existing algorithms beyond recognition, the leaked information might become useless. Sarah walked to the central workstation, her mind shifting into the kind of extreme focus that had made her capable of developing complex algorithms under pressure. We're not going to modify the existing algorithms. We're going to abandon them completely. Abandon them? Captain Rodriguez asked. Sarah, those algorithms represent months of development work. And they're completely compromised, Sarah replied, her fingers already moving across multiple keyboards. We're going to develop an entirely new approach using techniques that don't exist in any database, that haven't been published in any research, that can't be predicted by anyone because they've never been conceived before. The scope of what Sarah was proposing made her team pause in their work. Developing entirely new cybersecurity algorithms in 12 hours was beyond ambitious. It was theoretically impossible. Sarah, Dr. Walsh said gently, what you're describing would normally take years of research and testing. We don't have years, Sarah replied grimly. We have 12 hours to save the American financial system, and we're going to do it using approaches that are so unconventional they can't be countered by conventional thinking. She began working with an intensity that her team had never seen before, developing code that seemed to violate basic principles of cybersecurity architecture. Instead of building defensive algorithms that protected systems by blocking access, she was creating algorithms that protected systems by appearing to grant unlimited access, while actually containing attackers within carefully constructed digital prisons. It's like digital Aikido, Dr. Chen observed, watching Sarah's work. Instead of opposing the attacks directly, you're redirecting their force against themselves. Exactly, Sarah replied without looking up from her coding. The attackers will think they've achieved complete penetration of Federal Reserve systems, but they'll actually be operating within simulated environments that give them no real access to anything. Captain Rodriguez was studying the tactical implications of Sarah's approach. And while they're trapped in the simulated environments, we can analyze their methods and develop permanent countermeasures. More than that, Sarah said, her excitement growing as the solution evolved, we can use their presence in the simulated environments to trace back to their real locations and identify the entire network of threat actors. Dr. Walsh was working alongside Sarah, developing AI systems that could manage the complex simulated environments in real time. Sarah, this is remarkable. You're essentially creating cybersecurity systems that turn attack attempts into intelligence-gathering operations. And the best part is, Sarah said with a grim smile, that even if there are insider threats monitoring our work, they won't be able to warn the attackers because the defensive systems won't activate until the attacks actually begin. The final hours before the coordinated attacks were a blur of intense coding, system deployment, and strategic coordination. Sarah's team worked with the kind of focused intensity that comes from knowing that failure could have catastrophic consequences for millions of people. 1 hour until estimated attack initiation, Captain Rodriguez announced. All systems deployed and ready, Dr. Walsh reported. Simulated environments active and monitoring for intrusion attempts, Dr. Chen added. Sarah stood in the center of the command facility, surrounded by displays showing the real-time status of the most unconventional cybersecurity operation in history. In 1 hour, they would discover whether her radical approach to defending American financial infrastructure would work in practice. Team, she said, addressing her colleagues who had worked tirelessly to implement her vision, whatever happens in the next few hours, you've participated in something unprecedented. We've developed cybersecurity capabilities that didn't exist before today. And we've done it under impossible conditions with impossible deadlines, Captain Rodriguez added with admiration. Now we find out if impossible is good enough, Sarah replied, her eyes fixed on the countdown displays that showed 57 minutes remaining until the coordinated attacks began.
The coordinated attacks began exactly when Sarah's intelligence had predicted they would. At 0347 hours Eastern Standard Time, multiple threat actors launched simultaneous penetration attempts against Federal Reserve networks, major banking systems, and financial communication infrastructure across the United States. Contact, Dr. Walsh announced as her monitoring systems detected the first wave of intrusion attempts, multiple attack vectors active across all targeted systems. Sarah watched the displays with the kind of focused calm that comes from complete preparation. Everything they had worked for in the past 36 hours would be tested in the next few minutes. Simulated environments activating, Dr. Chen reported. Attackers are achieving apparent penetration of primary targets. On the central displays, Sarah could see the attack algorithms working exactly as she had predicted they would. The threat actors believed they were successfully compromising Federal Reserve systems, but they were actually being directed into carefully constructed digital environments that appeared to be the real networks. Dr. Walsh, are the AI systems successfully managing the simulated environments? Perfectly, Dr. Walsh replied, her voice carrying a note of amazement. The attackers have no idea they're not in the real systems. They're conducting their operations exactly as they would in genuine network penetration scenarios. Captain Rodriguez was monitoring the tactical aspects of the operation. Sarah, we're getting real-time intelligence on their operational procedures, command structures, and technical capabilities. This is unprecedented. And we're tracing their communication back to source locations, Dr. Chen added. We're not just stopping the attacks, we're mapping their entire operational network. Sarah allowed herself a moment of satisfaction, but she knew the operation wasn't complete until they had identified and neutralized the insider threats that had compromised Project Cipher's classified algorithms. Dr. Walsh, are you seeing any indication that the attackers realize they're in simulated environments? None whatsoever, Dr. Walsh replied. They're operating as if they have complete access to American financial infrastructure. They're even beginning to implement the data manipulation algorithms they plan to use for economic disruption, which means we can analyze those algorithms and develop permanent countermeasures, Sarah said with growing excitement. We're not just stopping this attack, we're learning how to prevent all future attacks using similar methodologies. Captain Rodriguez looked up from his communication station. Sarah, we're getting reports from FBI counterintelligence. They've identified 3 potential insider threats within the cybersecurity community, including one with access to Project Cipher systems. Who? Sarah asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. Dr. Marcus Hoffman, NSA Cryptography Division. He had legitimate access to classified algorithms and has been under financial pressure that made him vulnerable to recruitment by foreign intelligence services. Sarah felt a mixture of relief and sadness. Relief that the insider threat had been identified and neutralized, and sadness that someone within the American cybersecurity community had chosen to work against his own country's interests. Status on the simulated environments? She asked, refocusing on the immediate operation. The attackers are completing their planned operations, Dr. Chen reported. They believe they've successfully compromised financial networks and are preparing to implement economic disruption protocols. Let them, Sarah said grimly. Every disruption they attempt in the simulated environment gives us more intelligence about their capabilities and intentions.
Over the next 2 hours, Sarah's team observed as the coordinated threat actors attempted to implement what they believed was the most sophisticated attack on American financial infrastructure in history. They tried to manipulate currency exchange rates, disrupt electronic trading systems, and compromise banking communication networks. None of it worked, because none of it was real. Dr. Walsh, Sarah said, as the attackers began to realize that their efforts aren't producing the expected results, are they beginning to suspect the deception? They're showing signs of confusion, Dr. Walsh replied, monitoring the attackers' communications. They can't understand why their successful penetration isn't resulting in observable impacts on American financial systems. Which means it's time for the final phase of the operation, Captain Rodriguez said, understanding Sarah's strategy. Sarah nodded and activated communication systems that would broadcast directly to the compromised networks where the attackers were operating. Attention all threat actors currently operating within Federal Reserve simulation environments. This is Sarah Chen, Director of Project Cipher. The silence that followed her announcement was profound. Every threat actor participating in the coordinated attacks suddenly realized they had been completely outmaneuvered. For the past 4 hours, you've been operating within simulated environments designed to appear identical to American financial infrastructure. Every action you have taken, every technique you have employed, every communication you have sent has been monitored and recorded. She paused to let the implications of that statement sink in before continuing. Your coordinated attack has failed completely. No American financial systems have been compromised, no economic disruption has occurred, and no sensitive data has been accessed. Dr. Walsh was monitoring the attackers' responses, which ranged from disbelief to panic as they realized the scope of their failure. Furthermore, Sarah announced, we have used your presence in our simulated environments to trace your communications back to your operational bases. FBI, NSA, and international law enforcement agencies are currently conducting simultaneous raids on your facilities in 12 countries. The central displays began showing real-time reports from law enforcement operations around the globe. In Russia, China, North Korea, in several other countries, cybercriminal organizations and state-sponsored hacking units are being dismantled based on intelligence gathered during the simulated attack. This operation represents the end of your coordinated threat network. Your attempt to attack American infrastructure has instead provided us with the intelligence necessary to dismantle your entire operational structure. Captain Rodriguez was receiving constant updates from international law enforcement. Sarah, initial reports suggest we've neutralized approximately 80% of the identified threat actors. The remaining 20% are isolated groups without coordination capabilities. And the insider threats? Captain Rodriguez replied, all identified and arrested. Dr. Hoffman is in federal custody, along with 2 other individuals who provided classified information to foreign intelligence services. Sarah felt a mixture of relief and sadness. Relief that the insider threat had been identified and neutralized, and sadness that someone within the American cybersecurity community had chosen to work against his own country's interests. Status on the simulated environments? She asked, refocusing on the immediate operation. The attackers are completing their planned operations, Dr. Chen reported. They believe they've successfully compromised financial networks and are preparing to implement economic disruption protocols. Let them, Sarah said grimly. Every disruption they attempt in the simulated environment gives us more intelligence about their capabilities and intentions. Over the next 2 hours, Sarah's team observed as the coordinated threat actors attempted to implement what they believed was the most sophisticated attack on American financial infrastructure in history. They tried to manipulate currency exchange rates, disrupt electronic trading systems, and compromise banking communication networks. None of it worked, because none of it was real. Dr. Walsh, Sarah said as the attackers began to realize that their efforts aren't producing the expected results, are they beginning to suspect the deception? They're showing signs of confusion, Dr. Walsh replied, monitoring the attackers' communications. They can't understand why their successful penetration isn't resulting in observable impacts on American financial systems. which means it's time for the final phase of the operation, Captain Rodriguez said, understanding Sarah's strategy. Sarah nodded and activated communication systems that would broadcast directly to the compromised networks where the attackers were operating. Attention all threat actors currently operating within Federal Reserve simulation environments. This is Sarah Chen, Director of Project Cipher. The silence that followed her announcement was profound. Every threat actor participating in the coordinated attacks suddenly realized they had been completely outmaneuvered. For the past 4 hours, you have been operating within simulated environments designed to appear identical to American financial infrastructure. Every action you have taken, every technique you have employed, every communication you have sent has been monitored and recorded. Your coordinated attack has failed completely. No American financial systems have been compromised, no economic disruption has occurred, and no sensitive data has been accessed. Dr. Walsh was monitoring the attackers' responses, which ranged from disbelief to panic as they realized the scope of their failure. Furthermore, Sarah announced, we have used your presence in our simulated environments to trace your communications back to your operational bases. FBI, NSA, and international law enforcement agencies are currently conducting simultaneous raids on your facilities in 12 countries. The central displays began showing real-time reports from law enforcement operations around the globe. In Russia, China, North Korea, and several other countries, cybercriminal organizations and state-sponsored hacking units are being dismantled based on intelligence gathered during the simulated attack. This operation represents the end of your coordinated threat network.
Your attempt to attack American infrastructure has instead provided us with the intelligence necessary to dismantle your entire operational structure. Captain Rodriguez was receiving constant updates from international law enforcement. Sarah, initial reports suggest we've neutralized approximately 80% of the identified threat actors. The remaining 20% are isolated groups without coordination capabilities. And the insider threats? Sarah asked. All identified and arrested, Captain Rodriguez replied. Dr. Hoffman is in federal custody, along with 2 other individuals who provided classified information to foreign intelligence services. Sarah looked around the command center at her exhausted but victorious team. In less than 48 hours, they had developed revolutionary cybersecurity capabilities, deployed them under impossible conditions, and used them to neutralize the most sophisticated, coordinated cyber attack in history. Dr. Walsh, she said, how effective were the AI systems in managing the operation? Beyond our most optimistic projections, Dr. Walsh replied with amazement. The hybrid intelligence approach worked flawlessly. Human creativity provided the strategic framework, while artificial intelligence handled the computational complexity of managing multiple simulated environments simultaneously. Which means Project Cipher isn't just a success, it's a new paradigm for cybersecurity, Dr. Chen added. Sarah nodded, understanding that what they had accomplished would fundamentally change how America approached cybersecurity threats. Captain Rodriguez, what's our next assignment? Based on the success of this operation, Project Cipher is being expanded. You'll be leading the development of cybersecurity capabilities for the entire Department of Defense. Sarah looked around the displays, still showing the aftermath of their successful operation. Threat actors around the globe being arrested, insider threats neutralized, and American financial infrastructure more secure than it had ever been before. 3 days ago, she was a college student worried about final exams. Now she was the leader of the most advanced cybersecurity task force in American history, responsible for protecting her country's critical infrastructure against threats that most people couldn't even imagine. Team, she said, addressing her colleagues who had worked tirelessly to make the impossible operation successful, I think we can officially say that we've graduated from theoretical cybersecurity to the real thing. And we've proven that with the right combination of human creativity and artificial intelligence, there's no cybersecurity challenge we can't overcome. Sarah smiled as she looked around the command center one more time. Outside these walls, millions of Americans were going about their daily lives, completely unaware that their financial security had been protected by a group of cybersecurity specialists working in secret beneath the Pentagon. It wasn't the college experience she had planned, but it was exactly the future she had unknowingly been preparing for her entire life. All right, Project Cipher team, she announced, let's go save the world. Again.
As the team began shutting down their systems and preparing reports on the operation, Sarah reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought her from an MIT dorm room to leadership of the most advanced cybersecurity task force in history. She had learned that the greatest threats often came from the most unexpected directions, that the most effective defenses were sometimes the most unconventional ones, and that protecting her country required not just technical brilliance, but the courage to take impossible risks when the stakes demanded it. The red phone on the command center desk rang, indicating a call from the highest levels of American government. Sarah picked it up, ready for whatever new challenge would require the unique capabilities of Project Cipher. "This is Director Chen," she said, settling into her role as the youngest person ever to lead a classified cybersecurity task force. "How can Project Cipher help American interests today?" The future was uncertain, the threats were constantly evolving, and the challenges would only become more complex. But Sarah knew that with her team's hybrid intelligence approach to cybersecurity, they were prepared for whatever digital warfare the future might bring. And somewhere in an MIT dorm room, another brilliant student was probably staying up late working on theoretical algorithms that would someday change the world, not knowing that they might be the next person to receive a midnight visit from federal agents with an offer to serve their country in ways they had never imagined. The cycle of innovation, recruitment, and protection would continue, ensuring that America's cybersecurity capabilities would always stay one step ahead of those who would use technology to cause harm. Project Cipher was no longer just a classified task force. It was the future of national security in the digital age. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.